day 3 of Aerospike Digital Summit 2021. My name is Bill O'Dell, the CMO of Aerospike. I've been the host for the last few days, and I'm here to guide you through the final day of this year's event. I want to first kick us off with the morning keynotes and then remind you of a couple of things on the final day of the event. So here we go. First and foremost, our morning keynotes are two very distinguished individuals, starting with Sanjay Gupta, the CTO of the US Small Business Administration. He's going to share with us his experience handling the overwhelming demands of the US economic recovery during the most recent events, most notably the pandemic. And Dave Pickles is the co-founder and CTO of the Trade Desk. And for those of you who are familiar with the ad tech industry, you will know that Trade Desk is only second to Google in terms of the volume of ad serving that goes on each and every day. And Dave is going to share with us on a very, very current topic, which is how to build customer trust while trying to maintain personalization technologies. So I'm sure you're all going to be interested in what Dave will share with us in a moment. Now, my final plea to you is if you wish to win an Aerospike Saturn V Lego rocket, always the most favored award we give out at every event that we do, all you need to do is go on social media during the day today and share your thoughts with your social media audience on what you think, what was interesting, what you took away from today's events, and please use the hashtags that are in front of you on the screen. So if you do that, you enter into a contest to win one of the most coveted prizes that we give out each and every year. I also want to wrap up by just saying once again, this event could not happen if it weren't for the generosity of our sponsors. You can see who they are on the screen today. Again, thank you to the sponsors for Aerospike Digital Summit 2021. Now, at the end of the event, I'm going to ask you again to give us your feedback. We welcome all your feedback for all of the sessions that we've held over the last 3 days. Good or bad, we welcome it all because we'll take it and put it into next year's event to try to make it as valuable as we can for all of you. So we'll send out an email a day or so after the event. Please keep your eye out and finish the survey. It's very short and it will be very, very valuable to us. And with that, I want to welcome Sanjay Gupta, again, the CTO of the US Small Business Administration. Sanjay has an amazing amount of experience leading digital transformation projects, both on the commercial and on the public sector side. He's led projects starting from strategy all the way through to successful execution. He has deep expertise in a wide variety of IT subject areas, including mobility, cloud, enterprise architecture, cybersecurity, big data and analytics, and artificial intelligence and machine learning. He is an author, he is a speaker, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Sanjay, and he's going to share with you again his experience over the last year handling the demands of the US economic recovery during the pandemic. With that, take it away, Sanjay.
Bill, thank you for the introduction. I am excited to be here today. Hello, everybody, as we begin day 3 of this impactful digital summit. I am Sanjay Gupta, Chief Technology Officer at the US Small Business Administration. And today, I would like to give you an insight into how the SBA scaled exponentially almost overnight and how we reimagined to deliver the nation's largest ever economic recovery initiative. Next slide, please. I will cover the following 5 topics. I will start with a brief introduction of SBA. I will take you back into March 2020 when this all started. Next, I will cover the key challenges that we encountered. I will then share how we overcame these challenges. Finally, I will conclude with key takeaways. Next slide, please. So let me begin with a quick overview of the US Small Business Administration, or SBA. SBA is a cabinet level agency focused on supporting the small business community and entrepreneurs, which are the engine of the nation's economy. SBA provides capital and other resources for entrepreneurs and small businesses so that they can begin their initiatives and contribute to the nation's economy. SBA also has a certification program for small businesses that makes them eligible for small business set-aside federal government contracts. And we also provide disaster assistance loans. So let me begin by providing some context. Hopefully that will give you an idea into the level of scaling that happened almost overnight. In a typical year, we process anywhere between $25 billion to $30 billion in capital and loans. In the last year, we have processed nearly $1 trillion in capital through the nation's largest ever economic recovery initiatives, the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Programs. And by the way, these programs are still going. The volume, and more importantly, the velocity of the transactions that we were processing were truly unprecedented. So let me take you to March of 2020. Next slide, please. I want to take you back to March of 2020 and highlight the two dates in here. March 13th of 2020 is when the president declared COVID-19 as a national disaster. The significance of this date is that once the president declared COVID-19, the global pandemic, as a national disaster, a disaster assistance program went into high gear immediately. The second date is March 27th of 2020, which is when the CARES Act was enacted, and which put our Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP program, into high gear. So as you can see, within a span of 2 weeks, two of the nation's largest ever economic recovery initiatives started. And SBA was at the forefront in delivering these two initiatives. Another significance of March 13th, 2020 is the fact that that is when the federal government decided to move to what's called as a maximum telework status for all federal agencies. Obviously for SBA, a smooth and a rapid transition to telework was very critical so that we could ensure continuity of business operations and deliver those two programs, EIDL and PPP. Next slide, please. So let me talk a little bit about some of the key challenges we encountered through the course of this unprecedented time. First and foremost, like I talked about, we transitioned to telework almost overnight. And mind you, most of the federal agencies have never probably in their prior history have been used to transitioning to telework status at any point in time in the history. So this was clearly an unprecedented opportunity to move to a telework only status. We were no different at the SBA. While we were doing a transition to telework, we were also scaling up from a staffing standpoint. To just give you a compare and contrast, when we started, say January of 2020, to the peak times, we were scaling up from a staffing standpoint, and we were roughly at the peak point 4 times the staffing size that we were prior to the COVID pandemic. So the staffing surge was also going on at the same time, and most people were onboarding in a virtual only manner. And in retrospect, some of these people will probably have never set foot into an SBA office while they were delivering to the SBA's mission and goals. We were also faced with some crisis in terms of providing them with laptops. As some of you may recall, there was a supply chain disruption going on at the global level back then in March, April of last year. One of the things around the federal government is we have to provide what's called as a GFE, which stands for Government Furnished Equipment for all staff in order for them to perform their duties. So we were faced with a staffing surge, a telework situation, and we were also faced with equipment shortages that we had to deal with. And all along, the nation's economic recovery initiatives were underway. Last but not the least, we had a major scaling challenge. We had no idea at that point in time the level at which we would have to scale up from a transaction standpoint. Like I said earlier, to give you a compare contrast, we were scaling up from a staffing standpoint. We went up 4x the size. And in terms of from a dollar volumes, we were processing nearly what we were processing in one day, what we processed in a 12-month time frame. So again, let me say that one more time. The scale at which we were operating was in a 24-hour period of time, we processed as many transactions typically that we would take 12 months to process. So that gives you an idea about the scaling challenges that we were facing. Could you go to the next slide, please? So let me try and address how did we address these scaling challenges. So from a telework standpoint, we had already started implementing a secure cloud-based network connectivity solution in the fall of 2019. So as we moved to full telework status, we accelerated the implementation of the solution. We knew the value of using this solution because it allowed us to scale up very quickly. And also the performance was there. And by the way, it was in a secure manner, so we were able to have a good and a strong cybersecurity posture using this solution. The traditional VPN solution was also facing performance degradation because if you think about it, pretty much the entire global entities were relying heavily on VPN solutions. The networks were saturated and the VPN solutions were also saturated. But the fact that we'd already started transitioning to this new cloud-based secure connectivity model gave us a leg up. Second, we had already started deploying virtual desktops in the SBA cloud. And third, we'd started using things like conditional access, which allowed us to secure the connections for the remote staff, and by connecting it with multi-factor authentication. So conditional access using MFA allowed us to provide the cybersecurity posture and the coverage that we needed to have for our remote staff. We'd also increased the delivery of collaboration tools. We accelerated the implementation of these tools, and we also provided additional training programs for our staff to be able to use these tools in an easy enough manner. So let me give you a little example about some of the things that we were undertaking and what was some of the work that we had done in the prior years that allowed us to deliver to the biggest challenge that we had all faced. So let me take it back in time a little bit into 2017, which is when I'd onboarded the SBA. Back then, I had led the initiative in 82 calendar days, mind you, for the SBA cloud. We went from no cloud to a design migration plan architecture in 82 calendar days. And that had set the foundation for the SBA to set the use of cloud infrastructure. We'd seen some immediate value of this infrastructure back in the fall of 2017 when three major hurricanes, Harvey, Irma, and Maria, had hit the southern part of the United States. And our disaster assistance programs had immediately come into high gear. And at that point, we had utilized the ability of the SBA cloud to scale up rapidly and also scale down when the need for that came down. That foundation in hindsight was very critical in our ability to respond to this new global pandemic that we were all facing. In 2018, I had the opportunity to lead a 90-day trusted internet connections modernization pilot. In the federal government, the trusted internet connections is a policy and an architecture that was set in place in the 2007-2008 timeframe. What it does is it sets some parameters on how the federal agencies use the internet and how do you access the internet, and hence the name Trusted Internet Connections. In fall of 2017, when I was leveraging the SBA cloud to scale up, I had the firsthand experience of the limitations this Trusted Internet Connections architecture imposed on our ability to use the cloud. So in 2018, working with OMB, DHS, and GSA, these are three major agencies in the federal government, Office of Management and Budget, Department of Homeland Security, and the General Services Administration. I worked with these three teams and led the pilot to show how we at the SBA could achieve the goals of the Trusted Internet Connections using this cloud-based tools that we deployed at the SBA. Why this is important is because the work we had done back then had informed the Trusted Internet Connections policy update, which came out in late 2018, which is called the TIC 3.0 update. And that was very critical, not just for the SBA, but across the federal landscape, as most people were leveraging the cloud increasingly, and they had a remote workforce in place. In 2019, similarly, I had an opportunity to lead what was called as the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program by the Department of Homeland Security. The program, in a nutshell, talks about, as the name implies, how do we look at continuously managing, monitoring, and securing our entire networks, and hence the name CDM, or Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation. Again, back in 2019, I had the opportunity to work with the DHS CDM program team in leading a 90-day modernization initiative, which allowed us to showcase the ability of the cloud-based cybersecurity model that we deployed at the SBA back then. So in 2020, as we encountered the challenges brought upon by the global pandemic and the scaling challenges that we were encountering, the foundations and the work we had done, and I had the opportunity to lead, became instrumental in our ability to respond and be able to maintain a firm and robust cybersecurity posture. Let me give you one specific example that will hopefully illustrate what we were able to do because of our innovation and our imagining, or rather I should say reimagining how we could deliver services in a cloud-based model. So in March of 2020, I was looking at a dashboard where I could see all of the incoming traffic from all over into the SBA portals. And what I recognized was that there was traffic that was originating from outside the United States. Knowing well that these programs, the PPP program, the EIDL program, they were designed for the continental United States only, I knew I had a tool in my tool belt that would help address this. Something called geofencing, if you're familiar with. So I called my CISO, I asked him and I said, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And he was like, Sanjay, I'm not sure what you're referring to. And I said, look, are you seeing that the traffic we are getting on our portals is coming from the outside of the United States as well as from within the country? And he said, yeah, I'm seeing that. And so what I did was I said, look, why don't we implement geofencing so at least we can block the traffic which was originating from outside the United States? And he and I, working together with the engineering team, got the approvals and we implemented that. I'm sure some of you will argue and say that for the bad actors, putting geofencing is not necessarily going to limit them from being able to do what bad actors usually do. But I'm here to say that at least at the basic level, for the bad actors who are maybe not that sophisticated, it blocked them from being able to do what they usually do. So this is just one example of some of the work that we were doing there. Next slide, please. So in terms of scaling, I cannot really imagine the number of magnitudes of scaling that we had to overcome. For example, again, to repeat, a normal year, SBA does $25 to $30 billion of loans and capital. In the last 12 months plus, we've done over $1 trillion. So you can do the math and see the level of scaling we had to do. And mind you, this is just not the volume, it was the velocity of the transactions as well. As some of you may remember, when the PPP program opened in early April last year, the amount of money that was appropriated by Congress was basically consumed or run out of within 14 days. And then again, there was a second round of PPP and a third round as well in later last year. My point was that the small businesses were hurting, and the nation was depending on us, the SBA, to be able to deliver to these programs quickly. So it was just not a volume challenge, it was a velocity challenge as well. We set up new portals, and often we set up these new portals within a matter of hours. And what I mean by that is we were agile, we were innovative, but we were agile innovative, if you will. And what that means is that the unit of measure of time changed for us. It was no longer months, it was no longer days, we were looking at hours. So for example, some of the portals we delivered were delivered within 24 hours. And what I mean by that is they were designed, the concept was initiated, they were designed, developed, tested, and implemented, sometimes within 24 hours. But in some cases, they took up to 200 hours or 7 days or so. So anyways, just to give you a sense of the scale at which we were operating and the speed at which we were looking to respond, that's what I call is agile innovation. We were also leveraging emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing as we were deploying some of these solutions, because we needed to look at every possible opportunity to help us accelerate the delivery of our solutions and services. Last but not the least, we were relying on our key partners. And I can say this, without the help of our key partners, we could not have succeeded in delivering to the nation's largest economic recovery initiatives. Next slide, please. So in closing, let me talk about a few takeaways. Processing nearly $1 trillion in loans and capitals for the nation's largest ever recovery initiative has been overwhelming and also tumultuous at times. There were bumps in the road, and there probably will still be bumps in the road as we continue to deliver these programs. The two key takeaways from our learning exercise over the last year plus. Number one, technology plays a critical role for any and every organization globally. That's one thing I think has been proven without doubt, at least in the last 12 months. But more importantly, organizations that used a more modern and a more current technology infrastructure were in a better position to respond to the dynamic changes that the global pandemic brought about. We at the SBA definitely saw the difference in that. Where we had modern infrastructures in place, we could see our ability to respond was much faster and much more nimble. We also had some of the traditional architectures in place, and naturally that was a larger challenge from a scaling standpoint and our ability to respond to that. The modernization that I talked about, we put in place in the prior years, certainly was an instrumental factor in helping us deliver to these initiatives. Number two, the value of telework. Again, this kind of goes without saying, most organizations, including the SBA, have relied heavily on telework. We've been in a maximum telework status since March 13th of 2020, and we continue to operate in the same model. What that means is most everybody in our staff is working virtually and have been virtually working for the last 12 plus months, and also have delivered to the SBA's mission. And we continue to do that. And I'm sure most other organizations, both in the private sector, public sector, not-for-profit sector, and the academia have seen similar virtual delivery to their mission needs. So I think we have collectively proven that people can be productive, they have been productive, and they have been able to deliver to the nation's challenges that were brought upon by the global pandemic to their individual organizations. There are many benefits in telework, but just to sort of name the two most important ones, first and foremost, I'll take an example from an SBA perspective. We grew in size to 4x, but guess what? We did not have to go out and look for additional office space as we were growing up in size. We delivered, we saved on cost, but more importantly on time that would have needed us to scale up from an office footprint standpoint. And I'm sure the similar story can be talked about across the larger landscape in the global environment. And number two, from a hiring, attracting, and retaining talent, the fact that we did not have to be limited to a talent pool within the Washington, D.C. area, we were able to hire and attract talent across the nation. Certainly something which we would not have been able to do so had we not been in this telework status. I'm sure there's many more benefits from telework, but again, just to summarize the two takeaways, technology continues to play an important role and is likely to play even more of a technology critical role in the future of any organization. And number two, I think telework has been proven beyond doubt the value it brings to organizations. So finally, I would like to close out by saying reimagining and adapting to the changing landscape is what it ultimately boils down to. We at the SBA had the opportunity to reimagine the way we would deliver service. Often we did not have a lot of time at our hand to be able to reimagining, and were we needing to adapt to the changing business needs and being able to be nimble and agile and innovative in our delivery. With that, Bill, I want to turn it back to you and let's take on some questions.
Well, Sanjay, thank you. Not only for your wonderful presentation, but for what you and your staff did for all of us in helping the small businesses around the country, which we have so missed and not being able to visit, but also the impact on the economy, as you stated, is so profound. So thank you for that. I think we're all lucky to have had you in that leadership position for the last year. So thank you. We don't have a lot of time for questions, but I'll try to get two out. I was struck by your comment about the ability to use the cloud to scale, but not just to scale, but to also do it in a secure fashion. And I thought your comments about the TIC network was really interesting. Are there any takeaways that you might share with this crowd that are not in the government space, but are in the commercial space? Anything, lessons learned there that you would share uniquely on the cloud?
Yeah, certainly. And thank you, Bill, for having me share SBA's experiences and helping the small business and the economy of this country. So really, I think there's two or three items that come to mind. And I think they apply to any organization. And so first and foremost, having a modern IT infrastructure, which is flexible and it's scalable to quickly adapt to your changing business needs. I think that's key for any organization, whether it's in the private sector, public sector, or not-for-profit sector, or academia for that matter as well. Number two, I would say, is the ability to reimagine and to be able to deliver innovative solutions quickly. I think the key word here is quickly, will have an impact on a organization's competitive position. And I think we've seen that in the last 14 months, organizations that were nimble, were agile, and were able to quickly respond to the dramatic changes in the business conditions have been more successful than the others, right? And last but not the least, I would say, and I've talked about this in my other presentations, that data is the currency of the digital world. And increasingly today, that resonates with this theme here, that the digital summit we are talking about. And increasingly, the ability to manage, monitor, and to be able to leverage data at scale, that's the key word, at scale, is again going to be a key differentiator, in my opinion, for any organization, regardless of which sector they perform in. So I hope the examples I've talked about and shared have brought out these 3 points quite succinctly.
One last question. The term "the new normal" has been bandied around for months now. What is it that you're going to carry forward from this in the future if you work at the SBA? Things are not going to be the same again, but what is going to be different? What did you learn that you're going to be able to carry forward?
Certainly. So first and foremost, telework, I think that is going to be a thing to stay here at the SBA and then the federal government. That's not something which has been done traditionally in a long-standing basis. It was more of a privilege or something which was provided as a perk, if you will. I think that's a model has changed and will continue to remain a requirement because it allowed us to attract, retain, and talent, which we could not traditionally attract because our headquarters are in the Washington, D.C. region. But in the last 14 months, we did not have the restrictions, so we could hire staff across the wide United States. So that's something which I think is going to stay. The second thing I think has come out, at least from a public sector standpoint, is modernization of IT is critical. And the ability for federal agencies to deliver services to citizens is largely dependent on the ability to modernize. And I think we're going to see more emphasis on modernization. Number three, obviously, cyber is very important. And I think in the recent press, we've heard about the importance and the criticality of it. So I think that's also going to stay.
Well, thank you again, Sanjay, for your time with us this morning. We greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you for your efforts to help the small businesses around us. Thank you.
Thank you.